So they've weirdly changed the title of
They
this. It was
did.
just Gran
They
Turismo.
did change the title. I'm glad you got that. Yeah, it was weird.
They added colon based on a true story, maybe for search purposes or so it doesn't. I don't know. For some reason. Anyways, this is based on both a video game and a true story of Jan Mardenborough from the UK, who was the winner of Nissan and Sony's competition they held to find the best racing sim drivers and put them in real race cars and see if they could actually race real cars. And turns out they could, and they won. And he went on to win races, to race at the famous Le Mans 24-hour race, and now continues to race and is also like a stunt driver, stunt performer, and he makes an appearance in this movie. So it's that story told by Orlando Bloom, or it stars Orlando Bloom and David Harbour as both the marketer and the professional driver, chief of engineering, who kind of come up with this scheme to bring gamers to the racing track. And it stars Archie Madekwe, who we actually saw from Midsummer. He's briefly in that movie. He doesn't last very long. But his story is he comes from a very working class background. His dad says, you got to get a real job, kid. You can't race cars all your life. We're not these people. You got to be wealthy to do that. He discovers the competition, gets into the Gran Turismo Academy, has to prove himself there, and then goes on to race for real. This is all the trailer gives away the whole movie. But the journey is still interesting. I think it's very well made, and it's a lot better than it deserves to be. I saw it with a very full crowd who was cheering, clapping, crying through it. So it's definitely a crowd pleaser. So, Zach, what do you think of Gran Turismo based on a true story?
So I'm in the same boat as you. Like, I saw the first trailer of this movie, it felt like gave away everything. The final trailer absolutely gives away nearly the whole plot. Like, it is crazy how much it gives away, which is a thing now in movies, but it makes it tough when you know your movie's over 2 hours long and you're like, oh my God, like I gotta go watch this thing that I already know the whole plot for. We watched a lot of trailers on this. It's easy for me to be jaded. I can say confidently this movie is better than it looks, which is good. It's not that surprising, though, with Neill Blomkamp at the helm, right? Like, he's no slouch. Additionally, the talent in the movie is good. Archie Madekwe? I was going to say, like, Madaweki, which I know isn't right, but I don't know. That's what came to mind. He's actually real solid. He's young. He's got a little room to grow, but he brings enough charisma to a role of somebody who's supposed to be kind of a gamer and kind of introverted. He's not good at like publicity, being in front of cameras. So in that way, he feels like he fits as kind of an awkward dude growing into this role. David Harbour's a delight. We last saw him in Violent Night. He's also in Stranger Things. Love him. Orlando Bloom, refreshing to see in kind of this sleazeback marketer role. But unfortunately, I think the movie is also tarnished, kind of like by a thick coat of marketing veneer for PlayStation and Sony products and Gran Turismo, and also
and Nissan,
a ton of Nissan. I didn't know Nissan was going to be making a movie this year, but they did, and it's secretly Gran Turismo. I'm excited to talk about it. Like I said, a pretty decent summer romp. Andy, where do you want to jump in?
So, gosh, there's a lot of places to start. I want to start with our cast, I think, and say this movie is it's kind of paint by number, and it could have been very mediocre and really bad, but I think it does a very predictable thing, but it's done very well. David Harbour, I feel like, really carries this. He plays this, he's like the racing coach that's got to turn all these gamers into racers, and he's not nice. He's basically like, none of you can do this. You all suck. It takes like elite athleticism to drive a car for 3 hours and not, have your body fail. He's like, I've done it. You won't do it. But he has this kind of weird charisma. Like, even though he's mean and doesn't believe in anyone, he's still so charismatic on the screen. He's so good and very convincing in his role. Orlando Bloom is the kind of sleazy. He's got the marketing angle. Everything's, he's like he doesn't want to go with Jan Mardenborough initially because he's like, he's kind of weak in front of the camera. He can't talk, he doesn't have the square jaw like this other guy. And so he does that role well. And then, we have a slew of newcomers. Former Spice Girl Jerry Halliwell plays his mother in this movie,
Oh
which was
wow,
a nice
I didn't put that
nice
together.
touch.
Yeah.
And the great Jaimin Hansu, cash collecting a check, doing way he's way too good for this movie, but he does a good job as the father. Like I said, it's very paint by number, but it just does what it does really well. And Gran Turismo, if you haven't played, is a racing simulator, so it's not like a very fun game. It's very, very hard because it's actual racing. You have to learn in the game, like you learn a lot about like steering and braking, acceleration, like how to take turns, how to take corners properly. You have to learn about like tire allocation. Like it's very technical, and like the very first race you do is usually a circle, and it's really hard to win because it's not like Need for Speed or these other things. You really learn a lot about driving and racing and how cars work, and it'll affect your actual driving because that's happened to me from playing it. So it's like this real deal simulator.
Yeah, Andy's absolutely right. I'm glad you actually slipped in the bit about the simulator. I completely forgot. It is based on a game, of course, and a true story, as the title has been changed to. Quick note about Jaimin Hansu before I jump to the plot. He's actually really good in this movie. He's really good. And, like, he's said in interviews in the past that he feels like he's typecast as, like, you know, a mythical warrior or some kind of, like, ancient soldier or something, or, like, God's servant, like he is in Shazam,
Totally.
right? And like in this, he's just playing like a dad who used to be an athlete who he's kind of had his shot in the sun and got injured, and now he works a job, so he wants better for his kids and he's passionate about it. He's great, dude. He's barely in the movie too, and I was like, dude, it's really nice to see him playing something so grounded and playing it so well. He's a great talent. He needs to be in more movies. Regarding the plot, I know we said it's all in the trailer, but I'll give you the overarching here with no spoilers. Of course, we don't do that here. Archie plays Jan, yes, a young gamer who is basically dropped out of college and has no real aspirations, but keeps telling his parents, I want to be a racer. It's what I want to do. And they live in, you know, middle income housing in Britain, and they're like, we can't afford it. You need $1 billion to be a racer, which is true. But he notices one day on his favorite game, Gran Turismo, that he's been entered into a contest because he's got the fastest lap time on one of the tracks in the game, and he quickly discovers that if he wins, he goes to GT Academy, right, where he'll learn to be a real racer alongside 11 other contestants from around the world. All this is organized by sleazy Orlando Bloom, alongside, of course, David Harbour, our pit engineer, who is very skeptical about the whole thing. Brings that like kind of father figure, but also a bit of sass to it, right? He's sarcastic. And as these gamers try to learn to be drivers and one-up each other, Jan quickly rises through the ranks and then has to go on to multiple sets of competitions to become better and better, get your racing license, right? Like become a racer. And I think what's neat about this movie is it doesn't just stop at he won the GT Academy. He won the game. No, there's like another hour of film where he has to go get a license and he's jetting around the world and his parents don't really believe in him, which is a weird write-off because it feels like his family would, but I think that's just adjusted.
They kind of disappear for half the movie.
They kind of vanish. Like at one point he's flying to Vienna, right? Which is something he's never done. And he's talking to his mom on the phone and she's like, well, good luck, dear. Have fun. And it's like, if your kid is getting in a 200-mile-an-hour rocket and flying around the world to race, like a deadly activity, you would be going to those games. Like, it's surprising to me that she's not attending races, but like, I don't know. They don't seem to be that into it. Anyway, like, I think the movie feels full. And if I was a kid, I would feel like it felt really grand because it's not just qualify for race, do good in school, win race. That's like half the movie. And the other half is a series of increasingly challenging races with increasingly challenging racers. They're going to big tracks, right? They go to the Nürburgring in Germany. You see Le Mans in I guess Vienna. Like you go to all these places where you're seeing big cars, big action. France. I'm not into racing. Big action, big cars. And I think that's the stuff Blomkamp does really well. He shoots machinery great. The races, though, I do want to talk about, feel a little out of sync. And I think I'll talk about that in general direction. But what else you got, Andy?
Yeah, I think the technical part of this movie, I think, is what's done really well. Like they get a lot of the cars. The cars are on tracks. They're racing. Like there's a lot of drone shots, which actually kind of make me a little nauseous.
It's kind of too much.
Like,
there's a few too many drone shots, admittedly.
But some of it is totally like VFX shots of the everything, the track, the cars, for some of the more dangerous stuff. But there is a lot of like hot, fast cars and like camera rigs all over them. That stuff I think is done pretty well, and that's part of the feeling of Gran Turismo is like driving 150 miles an hour around a track and trying not to throw the car off. It also does get into the very dangerous nature of racing. Racers die usually every year in a variety of motorsports. There's a great documentary called Senna about Ayrton Senna, who was a Brazilian F1 driver who died tragically, and it was like crushing to the whole nation. It's a very dangerous sport, but it's also wildly popular. But it doesn't shy away from the dangerous aspect.
Yeah, I think Blomkamp I like fills in the gaps in direction where the screenplay is lacking. Like, because for the first act of this movie, it feels a lot like marketing. Like I was watching it thinking this movie feels like it's made by the character that Orlando Bloom is playing. Like this sleazy marketer who's like, how can I sell Sony and Nissan and like, I don't know, like how can I wrap all this up? And it's like he plays the game and then it becomes a thing and you get these sequences where he's playing the game and he gets home and he's got his PlayStation controller and you're like, boy, this is so Sony heavy. Insofar that the first minute of the movie is literally an ad for Gran Turismo. It explains what the game is, that it's the most accurate racing simulator in the world, shows you a ton of footage, the guy who made it, them making it, scanning cars in. The credits of the movie are also that. Like it is bookended by advertising. And in the end of the film, when you've got a bunch of people watching a race, they're in the PlayStation lounge and there's Sony marketing it. Like it's brutal. The Nissan logo is everywhere. But in the longer parts of the movie, you forget that that's what you're watching because Blomkamp steps on the sincerity. Like he really leans into David Harbour kind of bringing this kid up and being like, hey, I really believe in you. You know, like you're not nothing. I might be sarcastic, but like you have genuine talent here. And Jan coming to find that in himself and his dad finally coming around and Orlando Bloom being like, but what about the views? What about the numbers? Right? Like that's like all that stuff I think ends up working real good. Yeah. The only other thing I want to say about the sequences in regards to the actual races, the actual race scenes, to me, maybe you'll connect with me here, Andy. Like they lack a certain like geography. It's hard to keep up with what's going on in the races, and they fix this by doing a lot of freeze frames with hover cards, like just text over the top of the screen where they explain what's going on, or they'll put in like a little arrow that points at a car, and they're like, this one's in place 3, this one's in place 4, and then it'll cut to another shot, and it'll be like, now he's in place 2, and it's like, hold on, like that's not very good like geography of a scene, right? Like you want to feel like you're in the cockpit racing with the racers, making the turns, and you don't really get that much. You get a whole lot of drone shots, VFX. It's still fun, but it's just odd. Like it's an odd way to put a race scene together. Usually you want to have pretty clear motives for every car you're dealing with, but it ends up coming off real chaotic. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, the scenes aren't quite as exciting as good as they were done in Ford v Ferrari. I think that those racing scenes are probably the best of recent race movies. They're good in this. They're not near as good. Like you said, I don't know where I am. I don't have the feel of the car being inside of it as much as I do in that movie. That's what I was kind of hoping for more of, that kind of thing where the car is shaking, you're taking turns at 100 miles an hour and what that feels like, what that looks like. It doesn't get into the weeds enough, and that's kind of what I wanted more from this. I wanted David Harbour's character to talk about, like, to really show his knowledge about racing and cars, and it just doesn't get into the weeds as much as and this is what I want from every sports movie. Like when we watched King Tennis, what's his name with Will Smith?
King Richard.
Yeah. Same thing. Like the kid, they're just like, oh, the kids are your daughters are so good, but then they never like get into why or the how or like
Right.
I wanted them to get into the weeds. Like I feel like it brings you in more. They probably think they're going to lose audiences, but I think it will feel more authentic that way.
Yeah, like don't shy away from just being like, oh, the brakes can't take it. Like, tell me why on a slope you have to take this race line instead of that race line, or why when it's raining, like you need to drive so much specifically different. At one point, Jan switches to a completely different model of car, more of like an F1 oriented, kind of like sit in the center thing with bigger, wider wheels. And David Harbour's like, it's gonna take a few weeks to learn how to drive on this before you go to the big race. And I'm like, it would take a year for a driver to switch over to that format. And like it's a little juiced up for sure, but I do think it makes for a pretty good popcorn kind of movie. Like I on the one hand, yeah, it's got flaws, but on the other hand, like seeing with the crowd was a really good time. I had this big fat guy sitting next to me, and like there's this one like car crash sequence in the movie where all the sound gets sucked out of it and you can hear a pin drop, and this guy goes, huh, that's physics, like right in the silence, and the car like explodes onto the ground. It's a whole thing. Like everybody laughed. Like it's just it ends up being a really solid summer flick, and I think that's what Neill Blomkamp was trying to make. Like mission accomplished. He's not going to win Oscars with this thing, but like it's a pretty solid, fun flick, and I think that's a really big victory coming out of a trailer that gives the whole damn movie away.
Yeah, it's a fun summer romp. It's it's for the crowd that just goes maybe once or twice during the summer, or once or twice a month, looking just for what's out that we haven't seen. It, like I said, I saw it with a big crowd. Like I said, they were clapping, cheering, tears, the whole, like it was working the crowd, and it was working on it. And even though it is a little bit paint by number, it was an enjoyable time. It's a little bit too long. There's this weird romance subplot that they could completely cut.
Yeah,
Zach probably just completely forgot about.
Yeah, I did.
They try
God, it's weird.
Yeah, there's some things that they could cut for length, and just put it at 2 hours, and it'd be good. It'd be fine.
Yeah, I think it's a fine movie. Also, music by Lorne Balfe, who I don't know if he does a lot of cinema soundtracks, but I know he does most of the music for Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed franchise. So if you like that music, which is solid, he does the music for this. I don't know why that jumped out to me. I just saw him in the credits and was like, oh, wild. But any other thoughts or recommendations, Andy?
That's the thing. There's a kind of antagonistic figure who races for Team Kappa, and he might as well call him like Driver McBadboy, because that's exactly what he is. He's like this very like stereotypical like rich wealthy kid who's no one can teach me anything, and like he's the one that drives the gold Lamborghini you see in the trailer, and he's kind of this forced antagonistic figure that you kind of roll your eyes at, but he's got the gold Lambo, which looks cool.
He also had my favorite line in the whole movie. There's a bunch of characters who will say goofy offhand video game oriented comments as like slander to Jan while he's driving, like, wow, you took that corner really fast, what'd you use, a cheat code, or you're a noob, like just ridiculous stuff. And our bad boy driver, he's got this great line in there. He says, I'm gonna nerf you, gamer. Like, it's so stupid. Like, a mirthless chuckle. That was me in the theater.
That's like
a mirthless chuckle.
Like at a Scott Pilgrim or something.
I know. Like, it's so bad. And like that those are the moments where the marketing like stings, You're just like, God, please go out and buy our game. Go buy play Gran Turismo today. Like, that stuff hurts. But like overall, I think the good outshines the bad, for me at least, and ends up being a pretty good time. So, Andy, would you recommend Gran Turismo?
Yeah, I would. It's a crowd-pleasing film. It's made really well. The racing stuff is very thrilling, very accurate in a lot of ways. It is an inspiring story to take someone who just played a game that they were able to put him on a track that he was able to win and able to race and podium at the Le Mans famous 24-hour grueling race. A team of simulated racers won that. So it is an incredible story. A lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Solid, turn your brain off and beat the heat for 2.5 hour kind of movie. Like, if you're going in thinking this is going to be some complex feature, watch the trailer. It isn't. But if you're just going in to have fun, right? Date night, whatever, need something to take your kids to, Gran Turismo is great. Yeah, on the other side of me, that reminds me, there was a dad hanging out with his son, and they were just chatting the whole movie. Dad, what's that race? Dad, why does this do this? And he was all into it, and I was like, that's a sweet moment. Like, God, you're not going to get that in any
Total
other movie
dad
in
movie.
theaters right now. Yeah,
Total
right,
dad
total
movie.
dad movie. Yeah. Gran Turismo, not too shabby. I don't know what streamer it'll be coming to. I couldn't tell you who put it out, but we'll figure it out. Probably on like Paramount Plus or something. Feels like a Paramount joint. I don't know. Anyway, we need to talk about a couple of trailers, some things coming out. Andy, what do we call this segment?
It's time for the trailer park.